All the news that no one else saw fit to print. Think of. Print. In his overall attempt at self-improvement, and specifically to clarify the responsibilities of his various inner operations, one man gave each of his organs a name and described to them their functions. He said to his stomach, "Your name is stomach, and your job is digestion." And to his lungs noted, "Your name is lungs, and your business is breathing." And after covering all the others, he came to his mind, and to it said, "Your name will be the mind." And since there is only one activity left, and everyone else has a job, I guess you see what that leaves you in charge of. Although he believed his delegation of responsibilities to be quite clear and comprehensive, he was ultimately less than satisfied with his mind's performance pertinent thereto. Everyone who lives in the city lives near traffic. And while all traffic makes a similar noise, everyone believes that the one they hear is special to them. People who live in the city are dumb. There was once a man who so pondered, is stupidity a matter of where you're born or the fact that you refuse to move? Yeah. The less specific you are in certain matters, the longer will many maintain an interest therein. As two men stood looking out over a vast expanse of earthly creatures, one of them said, "Strange that man is the only animal that experiences feelings of guilt." To which, after a few moments of silence, the other replied, "Perhaps he's the only one that deserves them." A comment which, though it brought their conversation to a halt, satisfied neither. Ordinary men feel that they're still making some sort of progress as long as they can find something a wee bit new to say about themselves. From one vista, all so-called religious beliefs can be seen as life's failed, less than successful attempt to keep man from worrying over his singularly unpredictable future. A man once asked one whom he thought knew, "Is there such a thing as mystical beliefs?" "You're speaking two different languages," was the reply. A fact never seen. Beliefs are open-ended, knowledge closed. And among ordinary men, there is no such thing as knowledge. And to himself, a man said, "Well, that about covers it." The less specific you are in certain matters, the longer will many maintain an interest therein. You can physically take a trip. You can mentally take a trip. You can even mentally imagine that you're emotionally taking a trip. But the sad truth is, whatever the sad truth is, in your particular sad old case. Before we pass out the crying towels, perhaps you'd care to consider this in light of how difficult it is to try and make yourself go someplace new, and of your rights in response. I indeed would be much more likely to undertake a fresh adventure if you had said, try and make yourself go somewhere new, rather than someplace new. Here, additional evidence of the extremes to which the mind can go in its resistance to actually going anywhere. 'Tis a sorry function that cannot successfully protect its own position. And of this oversight, no one ever accuses thought. save mystics. More of why the ordinary should quit whining and be satisfied with how things are. That's the title of this news item. One man became so continually infuriated over birds fouling his fancy outdoor furniture that life sent around an elephant to shit on it. Of course, this is a joke. The ordinary aren't ever going to quit whining. If men could learn how to listen to their genes, seancers and priests would be out of business. The ordinary on their ordinary radios seek extraordinary broadcasts, while oblivious to certain ordinary ones constantly transmitted of a nature extraordinary beyond their weirdest dreams. Those who not yet know where to look always look to others. A man once asked a mystic, "Can it be said that those who have been enlightened are your friend?" "Hell," he replied, "they're just barely their own friend." Seems always a disappointment to look north from Paris and not see Istanbul. The less specific you are in certain matters, the longer will many maintain an interest therein. How to tell that you're going to be mentally disturbed, if not ill, for the rest of your life. Here's how. You are now. And you take it personally. A man once asked a mystic, "Just what is the difference between taking something personally and taking something seriously?" And received a reply, which I will not literally repeat, which was simultaneously silly and objective, which of course did the man no good, since it was not what he had expected. There was once a race of beings who, each at birth, had a scurrying little creature placed in their mouth. Whether they actually swallowed it or not was up to them. A man once asked a mystic, "Just what is the difference between imagination and freedom of will?" And in reply, the mystic hit him upside the head with an equally dazed squirrel. Thoughts tend to see themselves as observers of events, while ignoring their participation therein. Thus, the commonness of men ostensibly undertaking a discussion of some physically occurring event, whose comments consistently open with the words, "Well, yes, I myself saw such and such thing happen and thought such and such about it," etc., etc. And this part of the universe was once a planet which was visited by creatures from another planet. The creatures so visited soon forgot about it, and those who did the visiting aren't talking about it. Yeah. If you're listening only with your ears. Everyone who believes that storms are a-coming always believe that there'll be a coming from without, except for those who believe that there'll be a coming from within. Another reason that weather stations are seldom placed in areas of known mystical disturbances. Yeah. One man used to listen to the news. Sometimes it seemed bad, and at best sometimes not quite so bad. He eventually said that he had had enough of it and quit listening. And yet, the news still came to him. Huh? He thought. Only to finally realize that his thoughts were the news. Sailors on a routine voyage, whose thoughts and waves are as one, are never able to locate a sailing schedule whose tides they find favorable. There was once a man who, to himself, said, If I myself cannot awaken, then I'll settle for being able to murder some metaphorician. Relief, relief. There was once a boy who believed that his father knew a great secret and began to relentlessly petition him. Tell me what it is. Until finally the old man told him, and upon hearing it, the kid said, "What?" Back to square one. More ways to tell that you're dumb as hell. You look dead-eye into a mirror and say, "Quite interesting, but what is it?" Legend holds that the first emissary life ever sent to contact man got lodged in his throat. Or even higher. Quick, without thinking about it too much, answer this. What's easier than shooting hippos in a wading pool? Why? Criticizing man, of course. But the real question is, don't you ever wonder why this is? Free theatrics. Where regrets are taken as a sign of wisdom, there does man reign. Ordinary man, that is. One man had a train that ran through his bedroom. It only seemed to run at night. That is, until he got better acquainted with it. As Adam was being driven from the quiet, peaceful garden of his origin, he pleaded for some souvenir to take with him to help soothe his coming days. So the big guy gave him the talent of being able to resist the urge to know himself. Yeah. One thing that always distinguishes a mystical myth from an ordinary one is that the latter tends to make some kind of sense. Sometimes. If making sense was indeed the foundations of the mortal scenario, said the snake to Eve, I'd have bit you straight outright instead of having to trick you. The nonverbal memory of genes turns into the myths of man. And only a very few, through mind, can this web undo. A neural looking back is a complex art, not one given to many. Thus the uselessness of the ordinary's reflections on their past. A big city hunter once decided to bag himself a carousel. But alas, it came to naught, for he couldn't determine at what part of the beast he should shoot. One music lover decided to build himself the best loudspeaker of all times. And yet what he unknowingly really wanted to hear was already coursing through him. The band leader announced that the name of the next dance was, "Look here, Neil, here's the deal. You can think and talk about discovering the truth about life until you're 90 years old and die. You can even think and talk about it all that you can right now. But you know what?" And all the would-be dancers crowd around the bandstand, yell back, "No, what?" And the leader answered them by kicking off a fast mambo while sticking a skunk in his horn as a mute. Enlightenment never looks the same in the land where it exists as it does from the land in which you look for it. And a man said, "What's that terrible odor I smell in here?" only to inadvertently offend his thoughts. Which reminds me, there was once a world on which the inadvertent did not exist. When you find it, it never looks like it did when you were looking for it. There was once a king who had so many wives that he could not tell them apart. But as he grew in wisdom, he realized that they were not his wives, but rather his thoughts. An awakened man allows but one type of person to sit and worship at his feet. His feet. Once wolves learned how to think, and thus had a better image of themselves, they rejected the old notion of superiority by strength and came up with the concept of spiritual charisma. A man whose thoughts are not ultimately crucified on themselves never dies sufficiently to discover the higher use of the mind. And a man mused, I think that I shall never see a repeat of the likes of me. He wanted to muse onward, but became stumped. There was once a mystical order, admission to which was dependent on a would-be knight's ability to catch an arrow in mid-flight. Without such talent, a man is forever at the mercy of his thoughts, who, lacking the capacity to think, have no mercy. There was once a mystical order, admission to which was dependent upon one hearing a tale such as this and being able not to get a headache. In another galaxy was once a planet on which the majority were mystics, and all that was left for the few to do to differentiate themselves was for them to make themselves routine and ordinary. Not unlike conditions here on earth, except here, no effort is required. And now, some questions. Which is the more alert, a lion or a man? Which one has any awareness of the matter of alertness? Why can't you get any of the large cats to participate in quizzes such as this? And now, some progress. Some progress. There was once a man who was full of doubts. He later came to see it as being full of shit. I wanted to ask you whether you thought this to be progress or not, but we used up all of our questions. A lad said to his dad, "Okay, Pops, put it to me simply." And the old man responded, "Anything that a man says about himself is a lie." "Anything?" asked the lad. "Anything," replied the dad. Humility, done aright, is not a question of humility, but of intelligence. The less specific you are in certain matters, the longer will many maintain an interest therein. And finally, a man once sought out someone suspected of knowing the secret. And when he found him, and the someone aimed a gun directly between his eyes, all doubts that the man had vanished. Let us, as well-deserved, momentarily acknowledge the singular benefits of thought, and then at greater leisure note its normally unnoted liabilities to a few. This in line with what we were talking about in general last time, that if a man cannot separate himself in a certain non-physical way, cannot feel himself separate from life, there is no possibility of ever succeeding at this, whatever the hell this is, affecting any individual change in his consciousness. There are two specific aspects to thought in light of what we're talking about now, and that is that thought is the connection between man and life that is singular and that does allow the wondrous activities, results, products that are unique to man. This is for the many, including everybody. And I say many this time. To a few, however, it can be seen the same connection, that everything that is confining, restricting, while first giving man the illusion of some freedom, is then the very thing that constricts and confines him, from a few people's view, is that same blessed activity, thought. Now, first, there is no doubt whatsoever that thought is deserving of no less than the aforementioned singular acknowledgement. Everything that we see on this planet that man has accomplished, from anybody's view, is the result of thought. It is not the result of his strength. Certainly, in many cases, not a result of his handsome appearance. Oh, that's strength. You ever notice people will absorb a small body blow of verbally attacking their strength, but when you get into their actual physical appearance, umbrage is never too far away. No. And there is, I have never actually calculated, well, I have, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I have never actually calculated the specific mathematical equation, but there is one having to do with the relationship between one's own assumed comeliness or lack thereof and tolerance of any mention thereof. Yeah. We've been through this in other areas. I just never thought to mention it with appearance. You can kick some people some places sometimes, and you can kick other people in the same places at the same time, and they will not take to it with quite the same sort of bemused enjoyment. In fact, some people will kick you back. There is nothing that man has accomplished any way you look at it. We could, theoretically, you could argue some of the terms, but anyone rationally, sanely wired up on this planet has no problem accepting the fact that were it not for thought, nothing that man has accomplished would have come to pass. That's it. Take away thought, and man is nothing but just another Homo sapien, or another primate, I should say. There's just no denying what man's thought has accomplished, and there is absolutely no denying, no question of the fact that in the world of thought can prove to be a most enjoyable field of avocation. And there's also no doubt, and a little more specifically, that the so-called, the assumed historical schools of some sort of transcendental activity have certainly not hesitated to make use of thought, as witnessed by the fact that if they indeed left any sort of written record, if they in fact started off with some sort of oral discourse on the matter of trying to change one consciousness, and they knowingly allowed it to be written down. So it is not a matter of any sort of blanket attack on thought. But once you get past the area of ordinary consciousness, the ordinary perception of what thought is, or conversely, or alternatively, if we speak of some man somewhere who is not satisfied with the routine knowledge, the routine information, the routine way in which he himself thinks, he can very easily, you're not children, he will inevitably fall into the initial acceptance of some other described manifestation of man, either internal or external. It always had some external source, to be the barrier, to be the obstacle for any change that he may desire. He will not start off, no one ever starts off seeing his own thoughts as being any potential barrier. This is not to say that a man will not start off and stumble upon, as is the norm. He will start off in religion until he wears that out very quickly. Assume we're talking about someone wired up to actually do this, someone who was born to travel. They will shortly run through religion and philosophy and etc. But let us say that they stumble upon the first of what they conceive to be some traces of this sort of activity. And they, as a rule, it is second and third hand, that is, they will read about it first. And the description will always be either directly or they will assume metaphorically representing the obstacle to a man's change as being some flaw in man, something lacking in man, something that man at one time possessed that he has lost or that he has abused to the point that it is no longer functional. But it is never a point-blank realization when a man starts that it is thought, not evil spirits we're talking about, is not man's unconscious mind, it is not man's semi-unconscious mind, it is not fate, it is not destiny, it is not anything other than, immediately, his own thoughts. And those of you who are beginning to see this, that it's not strange, to say the least, because a man could not start out and suddenly recognize that his thoughts were the first barrier. If he did, that'd be the end of him. I mean, that would just put a man into freeze mode. He could pursue nothing after that along these lines. You just have to turn away and either forget it absolutely or only recall it very spasmodically after that. It's just a fact that a man cannot start off realizing that. So it is not a matter that in any way to all of humanity, speaking in general, there is in no way is thought a detriment to man. And as a sidebar, as I point out several times, and some of you surely see it, those who believe that thought is are not even routinely wired up in a healthy fashion. Not by my definition, they're just outside the mainstream of the bell curve, the middle of the parade of life's general progress. That is, anyone, and there are people who will say, well, thoughts are the problem. I see that. You don't need to preach to me. By God, my thoughts are driving me crazy. If you start off believing that, you're not going anywhere anyway. They're not driving you crazy because you're not going anywhere. No, they may run you around the block in a red wagon, but they're not. Well, it's just a fact. I'm sorry. I say I'm sorry rhetorically speaking because I'm always fairly safe in assuming after the first 2 or 3 minutes anywhere that I'm only then addressing those who are fairly well wired, that we're not dealing with people who believe that thoughts in their mind are driving them crazy. We all know that there are plenty of people like that in the world. They're not the mainstream, but if indeed you start out feeling, if their recollection of all of their main attitude, their primary attitude toward their thoughts has always been like, it's driving me crazy. I wish the damn thing had shut up. I just must assume you understand that. But a little more specific in that area is that ordinary people, quite middle of the bell curve, middle of the parade, middle class, intellectually bourgeoisie people still feel that thoughts are in part their problem. But it's on this basis that not thoughts in general, which, as I said, would take somebody outside the even ordinarily wired machinery of the nervous system. But ordinary people believe, they will say, if the subject's brought up, that some of their thoughts, selective thoughts, are untoward, detrimental to them. But that is a far different thing than the latter possibility I started out pointing to regarding the few, that thought itself is a hindrance, the initial hindrance. It does no good. As one of the news items point out, everyone born in the city, which is everybody, that ends up with a demonstratively provable ordinary wiring system, the sane and ordinary people. Everyone is born in the city. And everyone is born, if you're born in the city, that is, you end up with your intellect minimally, ordinarily ignited. You can think and talk, and you're just an ordinary person. You're born in the city, and if you're born in the city such as that, you live near traffic. Everyone does. But everyone also believes, the ordinary, which includes everybody to start with, believes that the noise that traffic makes, even though it is similar, that everyone believes that the noise they hear is singular, or at least unusual, to them. The concluding paragraph in that news item was, everyone who lives in the city is dumb. Which, of course, was just my crude attempt at crude humor, which is not a hard task at which to succeed. Thank you, thank you. I think. All it's showing is that those who are born in the city, if that's as far as you ever go, you are dumb. That is, you'll never be able to answer any question. You'll never be satisfied with any idea, any theory, any notion you come up with as regards that eternal question of, what in the hell's going on here? You're simply dumb. You're born dumb, you'll die dumb. No problem. People just think it's a problem. Ordinary people just think, boy, I wish I wasn't so dumb. Yeah. We all wish we were rich and thin and good looking, but so what? It's not going to kill you. Hey, and if it does, sue me for being wrong. In fact, you should pay me for being correct, because if you're that upset with life, at least you died sooner than the actuary tables would have given a person your height and ugliness, if they ever get around to including that as one of the standards, which I know that many of you think they should. But then again, some of us would probably resist that. I mean, it could run some of our rates sky high. But at any rate, ordinary people, ordinary sane people, by life's definition, not mine, by their definition. We all know that just the majority of people in life, the sane and the ordinary, they believe that there are selective thoughts. They do not find blanket favor with thought, because every sane person has thoughts of which they highly disapprove. Or go somewhere from ranging from disapprove to extremely, or annoy them in an extreme and perhaps embarrassing manner. But that means nothing, because if you are sailing the ordinary voyage, then your thoughts and the waves, which is what appears to be the occurrences of life, are as one, not in sync. That doesn't matter. If you recall that news item, it said sailors on a routine voyage whose thoughts and waves are one. And I'm just rephrasing it a little more directly. If you're on a routine voyage in life, your thoughts and the waves, that is what apparently goes on in life, just the normal occurrences of life, are as one. Not in sync. That is, your thoughts are not in sync with the highs and the troughs of waves. That's one of the other illusions. That's one of the other ways that the ordinary mind can, to change metaphors in mid-ocean, weasel, or otter its way out. Because if you try and point out to other people that their thoughts and what goes on in life are inseparable, they will go, nay, nay. At least if they were born 500 or 600 years ago, they might. They will deny it, because they can point out selectively, at least, when I say selectively, I don't mean a small number of times, and at least 50% of the look-sees they might engage in, they can show where they are in opposition to what's going on in life. As though that proves some freedom, as though that proves that their thinking and what's going on in life are not in some way, as I put it, inseparably tied, that they're one and the same. They will say, not so. And they will immediately, as fast as their little lips and tongue will move, anyone can say, no, no, no. And they can just start just mentioning anything. They just pick up a newspaper, just look out, or pick up the tail end of the last conversation they overheard and go, all right now so-and-so is going on here in our city, here in our town, here in our country, on this planet. And I'll tell you what, I know damn well, I'm fully aware of the fact that the majority of people, all the political observers, the religious thinkers, whatever the subject is, that I know right now that by all polls, everybody, or the vast majority is in agreement to that. But hey, I'm going to tell you what, I'm not afraid to stand here and tell you I disagree with that. I do not believe that's the way we should be going. Well, you old free thinker, you. Which, with no undue sarcasm or irony, but I must point out that is the same kind of creatures that I reported on some nights ago on one planet who are all born with radios in their head. And you had a knob, and you can turn it from station to station. And you can turn it till you find stations you like, or if you're kind of overcome with kind of a red-ass mood, turn on a station you don't like. And you can fume and fret about it. You can talk back to it. And so them dumb old people sound like some kind of call-in show. Those ignorant bastards, those stupid cows. You can do that. Those creatures could. Here again, we find a point of deep, of real limbing between the ordinary mind and any other extreme possibility. And that is, if I then say that the belief that because you can change the station and react to it and pick out stations you like, hear incoming info that you like, or find some you do not like, an ordinary mind cannot see this. But anyone who takes that as being any form of freedom of will, anyone who takes that, the ability to change stations, which we're pushing it now, but hey, that's what metaphors are for. Until you grow out of Pampers. Yeah. Just because you can change the station, and not only change the station, which I repeat is really pushing it, but just because you can change the station, you can not only change the station by God, you got your own individual views, you got your own individual personality, because you can pick up some station, and it's professing some view or making some commentary on some matter, fiscally, socially, politically, and you can go, ha! Ha! Well, ignoramuses. If you take that as being freedom of thought, if you take that as being thought, you're hopeless. But you do understand, I can't stand here and recruit somebody to this, because an ordinary person, if they were listening to this and momentarily thought, well, I'll give you the benefit, I'll try and figure out what you're saying. You're saying that just because I react either one way or another, or because I can resist one thought, one set of ideas, or not, and I do it. There could be people next to me, it could be my family, my best friend, that agrees with a certain political idea, let's say. And I listen to it, I weigh it all, I ask a few pertinent questions, and yet I individually come to the conclusion, just individually, based upon my own reflection thereupon, I come to my own decision that this idea is to be rejected. Remember, I'm still talking for an ordinary person. And then they would say to me, or the likes of me, they would say, and you're telling me that that is not individual thought on my part. Of course, it's a rhetorical question on their part, because I can't answer it. I can't make them see otherwise. I'll try it one more time. You are not even in the same universe. You're not even in the ball game of being able to use what the mind is capable of if you're thinking about, in any way, if you're thinking about the subjects that life is thinking about, or put it simply, that everybody else is thinking about. And I'll go through it one more little scenario again, and an ordinary person can go, wait a minute, which ideas, which things, anything. And they go, you can't mean anything, because there's some things in life, I know that some things in life are probably just irrelevant. You know, I don't worry about sports, I don't worry about art, whatever your areas of wherein you have a lack of interest. But if a person says, but you don't mean anything in life, anything that ordinary people think about, you're saying that none of it is worthy of thought. Okay, yes, that's what I'm saying. And even if they give it their best shot, they'll go, that you're either speaking so allegorically that I can't comprehend it, or else you're crazy. You're wrong, because there's some things in life. Oh, I know, they'd say, there's some things in life that are a waste of time. There's some ideas that men just, or I don't even know how people discuss it. But there are some things in life that are important. Okay. You can't tell it otherwise. But here it is, I'll try it again for not the first time. Just at a minimal level, forget being more enlightened or more conscious, just at a minimal level of where you might step into the area internally wherein an expanded consciousness might be possible. You haven't even stepped into the area of using the mind in a way in which it is capable of being used, minimally. Because all you're doing now, if you're going along with the reactions of the ordinary people who I just played, you do not understand thought. You don't understand what is even possible. Because, I'll try it again as simple as I can. You are not thinking. You personally are not thinking if you're thinking about anything that anybody else has thought about. I mean, it really narrows it down. I might as well go ahead and say it. Well, it does. Since ordinary minds are not going to get it anyway, and they keep wanting to discuss it, well, you don't mean everything. Yes, everything. Well, no, wait a minute. How about this? No, not that. Well, wait a minute. Some things have got to be relatively, or have the potential to be relatively more important than anything else. No, they don't. I mean, why waste my time going through that? You can narrow it down. I mean, literally. I know it sounds ridiculous, but some of you already have seen enough. It's not a continuing operational awareness, I know, but some of you have seen enough that anything anybody has already thought about. And I don't care what it is. I'm not talking about just the contemporary retelling of the latest stock market reports or the soccer standings. I'm talking about you can pick up a book, in general, based upon or reporting great philosophical, the deep thoughts and reflections of humanity up until now. It can be an entertaining avocation mentally, just a pastime. But to look at what other people have thought and for you to react to it, well, I agree to that or I don't agree. You either, sooner or later, are going to see that is not thought. Just period. Forget conditions, forget metaphor. That is not thought. With ordinary people it is. With the majority of people, that is thought. That's all that's required to keep man in his unique position. That is all that is necessary to keep man as master, as he likes to say, of this planet. Since no other creature has seen fit yet to call his hand specifically on the matter. Well, every now and then the weather does. Man just turns, so to speak, a deaf ear like, well, shit, that doesn't count. Next year we'll simply build bigger pilings along the beaches, and then we'll teach those naughty hurricanes. There again, every now and then I touch on that, is just a beautiful example of life just screaming at man. Or the secret, if you want to know it. The secret itself, I say screaming at man, that sounds better with a hurricane and the force of winds. It's also screaming, it's also whispering, it's also just in a conversational tone, saying to man, hey, look here. Men never hear it. The so-called forces of nature are just a prime example, but notice how men treat it. It's always as some anomalistic occurrence. Well, yes, but hurricanes don't hit our area of the coast every year. Well, hell, that volcano hadn't erupted in 2,000 years. And on a quite lesser level, but to a more alert man, a more specific one, a man's walking along thinking great thoughts and trips, but he thinks, wait a minute, I hadn't tripped in hell, it's been 2 or 3 days now. Hey, we're not fooling around with some stupid cow here. We're getting into serious territory, right? Men cannot start off seeing thought in any way as being a detriment. This is really relevant. The part I threw out was just to give you somewhere to stand in case your mental footing still begins to slip, is that ordinary people, your own mind, will go, yes, or will agree that yes, some thought is of no consequence. Some thought could be maybe even potentially harmful. No, to someone attempting, someone who is wired up and born to do it, all thought, everything that's already been thought, which has already been thought through you, by the way. You don't have to go read books. I know you want to, like most people. Again, notwithstanding the fact that it can be a enjoyable pastime if nothing else is going on, but insofar as reading books, listening to other people talk as a basis of I will in this way nourish, if not propel forward at an increasingly profitable degree, my own development by listening to others is you find out anything that has been written, anything that's been thought, has already been written, thought, and said in you. There is nowhere else to look. And even if I'm not literally correct, even if there have been some things that have been thought in this world, some sentences thought that you have yet to think, I got to tell you the truth. So what? What if I'm incorrect? No. As obscure as the possibility may be. But even if I'm incorrect, that you personally have not had run through your thoughts everything that was ever thought. Let's say only 90%, that you have missed 10%. Okay? My question of so what is this? You've already thought everything that's already been thought, 9% of everything that's already been thought. What good has it done you?
Yeah.
How do you relate 90% of 100 to 0 to 100? In other words, if you've thought 90% of all that's ever been thought, that's the relationship 90% to 100%. And down at the other end, or another level, is then compare what good that's done you towards your goal. Your goal being 100%. So on one end, you're comparing 90% to 100%. The other end, you're comparing 0 to 100%. For anybody who can hear it all, it should at least make you go, if not worse, to your thoughts. But there is no selectivity in what I'm saying about thought. You just have to understand that to the many, to ordinary life, thought has been, and continues to be, man's singular ability. And it's to thought that man must pay all homage to everything that he has accomplished. That is out of the way. That's a given. There's nothing else to be said. There is no selectivity in there. There have been thoughts that prove to be less profitable than others. They get dinosaured. They get extincted. Life takes care of the thought process. There's nothing else to be said about thought at the ordinary level. It is man's singular glory. It is the one aspect responsible for every wondrous deed, every ounce of non-physical pleasure that he has ever experienced. On the other side, for someone attempting to do something extraordinary with the foundations that give rise to thought, consciousness, thought is less than beneficial. Not selective thought, not some thought here and there. It is not a fact of someone, if they say, well, my goal is to reach enlightenment, and so any thought that is not supportive of enlightenment, or especially a thought that would be anti-enlightenment, has got to be avoided. Because for every thought, every time I think, well, what I want to do is be a more enlightened person. And then I read some tract or some book somewhere, and somebody says, enlightenment's a bunch of phooey. There is no such thing. Anyway, everybody should resist enlightenment, even if it comes knocking at your door, run for it. And a person struggling for enlightenment for a long time, you don't have to be a child, for a long time, they think, well, fie, if not foe, upon anti-enlightenment thoughts. It becomes simpler and simpler. It's fie, and it's not even fie on all thoughts. I just keep dragging it up to that point. Let me see if I can go further than that. We've got a few minutes. It is not even fie on thoughts. That's what I'm trying to get you to see clear. It's not fie on traffic. If you live in the city, that is, your intellect, your nervous system has been fired up to the intellect. I hate to break the news to you, but just for all intents and purposes, you got that noise, you're going to die with that noise. The train runs through the bedroom, many people think, and it runs only at night. And that's as far as most people go. Those who become more familiar with the operations of said conveyance find that that is not true. That is, it only runs at night. The noise is there. The noise of thought, we all know, is never described on any wide basis, never has been, as thought. It's always described as, in some other way, as I said, as some flaw in man, some aspect of his consciousness that he has misused or that he has lost in some way. It's the noise of thought. You got it? Once you started thinking, traffic started running. For all general purposes, it will run until the day you die. One way that you can be assured of never escaping therefrom, of never understanding what it is is by finding selective fault with it. Is by only complaining about certain noises, only complaining that traffic would not be so bad if we did not have these four-door gas guzzlers, if we did not have green sports cars, or conversely, if we were not for all these damn trucks, if it were not for red four-door cars, were it not for foreign cars, were it not for local cars. As long as you look and you can find fault with any thought, I can guarantee you, although you don't need it, but I can guarantee you, you do not have to worry in your lifetime of traffic not only not stopping, but of even diminishing in the volume of its intensity and even annoyance. All you got to do is selectively find fault. Just in case any of you has ever had a fear, I don't know that it's happened, but if anybody here has ever had a fear like, my God, I was afraid my thoughts were going to stop. Okay, if you ever have that fear, I mean, free medical advice. All you got to do is find fault with some specific noise, with some specific thoughts. Bingo, you're right back in business. No problem. At any rate, what I was trying to get to, it is not only what I'm saying was that it is not beneficial to find selective fault with thought, with any thoughts. It has then got to get past that point, because that sounds as though, even though I can preface it by the caveat of I'm not here to hector and that's not here to make you feel guilty about it, because the noise is in you. I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world. I say the easiest thing in the world. It's also the stupidest thing in the world for those to listen to it from a select view. But to call some group of people or to say, well, I'll address you on an important matter. The expansion of consciousness. And we go, good, well, I'm here, I'm interested in that. And you go, all right, here's what I got to tell you. I have this magical ability and I can look in most people's eyes and then I can read their minds and all kinds of stuff. And I can tell that most of you, nay, wait a minute, everyone here has this non-stop, relentless noise running through your heads. Admit it! No! And everybody goes, oh boy, he got me. Whoo! And I go, how in the hell, how can you expect to ever see the face of Buddha, to hear the voice of Muhammad, to awaken to a higher state of consciousness when, let's not bullshit going through you. It almost, in my great mystical powers, I can hear it all and it almost hurts my delicate ears and sensibilities. I can hear it all. There's all sorts of curses and swearing and hatred and animosity toward your fellow man. And everybody goes, oh boy, oh, he got me. Jesus. And some of you like the idea of the easy sport of shooting hippos in a wading pool. Forget all that. All you got to tell humans. Oh, shame on you. Isn't that true? Yeah, how'd you know? You're alive. All right, pass that right quick. To the point of an individual here and there beginning to see it for themselves. They don't need anyone to remind them that it becomes. You become, as my little recent stories of Buddha. Now, forget Buddha trying to wake up the world and enlighten other people. All he's trying to do to keep the creation as we know it from coming to an end is not to bump his head and misplace his car keys for the 200th time. I mean, he's looking after himself. That's all he can do to keep himself going, much less I'm going to drag the world along behind into the enlightened, Turkish world of enlightenment, to the metaphysical, Turkish world of enlightenment. You have got to, once you see it yourself, get past the point of simply kicking yourself and feeling guilty. Although it's people normally will come up, especially if you've been around me and me sticking my tongue out and making rude noises all these years, that guilt is, and even you've probably done it on your own, because guilt sounds to be such a, we're taken to be such a mundane experience. Hell, your grandmother, people next door, drunks in the street. Ordinary people, you go, do you ever feel guilty? And they go, do I? So it's very common for those that get along in this quest somewhere to realize what guilt, or they get a better picture of where it arises and what are the conditions of guilt. It's mainly breathing. But, well, breathing and having an operational intellect, of course, is why you cannot make otters or hippos feel guilty. But a person will normally, or it's not uncommon for them to try to come up with some new description to themselves, which is understandable, to replace the idea of guilt. And yet you're left with this. Every time Buddha, let's assume I'm using that metaphorically, or Jesus, or whoever your imagined hero, some awakened figure, that he has seen what life's about. And yet every time he turns around and bumps into a door, there's no term for this. He doesn't like it. Let us go with that. But rather than just feeling guilty, rather than just going, Jesus, and hitting himself, and he's already hit his head, and it hurts twice, and him going, sorry old me. In the beginning, and for a long time, there doesn't seem to be any alternative to that reaction. What else are you going to do? It is something of which you disapprove. That I have lost control. I have lost sight of my own consciousness. I can't even hold it for a second. I cannot be alert as a would-be physical warrior should be. Forget catching arrows and bullets in midair. Hell, I turn around constantly and give them a pose. Here, shoot me right here. And sure enough, life shoots you, which of course then you come to find out is not life. You simply bumped your head again. But there is nowhere to blame, and yet that's the feeling of it, because a Buddha, anybody, you feel like, rightfully so, there I did it again. I do not want to do it. If I had my druthers, I would not do it anymore. That's all the fur and feathers that would be endemic to the creature guilt. But guilt doesn't do any good. A constant self-flagellation about, I'm not as conscious as I should be. Well, you're breathing. There's your problem right there to start with. You have got to get past the point of taking that personally, which is what I tried a few nights ago, and we're going to have to end with this. It's a guy that finally took a full survey of his thoughts. Pro, con, this and that. Took him a long time. You don't have a choice. It takes a long time. And he finally looked at all of them. All the great thoughts he had, all the sorry thoughts he had, all the thoughts that seemed to have some validity, all the thoughts that seemed to hold some promise. He finally got to the place he could see them for what they were, and he thought, the hell with all of you. Except that sounds pejorative, but it is an impartial, it is an impersonal, it is a totally objective, to hell with all of you. And it's only then that you can actually step in a place where you can do something resembling think for yourself. Not that that's the point of this, but if you cannot clear out that noise, if you cannot stop being distracted by every sling and arrow and every sound that comes from life, which you're supposed to be. This is not a sermon. There's nothing wrong. If you're ordinary, strike all this. Of course, you're ordinary. You're not even supposed to be listening to it. But strike all this. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to do anything with your own consciousness, never did get around to it tonight, did I? Big deal. Surprise. Of more of why you've got to be able to feel yourself separate from it. Not physically, but mentally. Because the rest of the time, you're not thinking. This is not theory. It's not some hocus pocus notion I came up with. It is simply observable by those wired up to travel. What you call thinking is not you thinking. If it was, you'd have some control over it. If it was, you could tell me what you're going to say next. If it was, you would plan each thought you had. And of course, everyone knows that's not true. No, they don't. Ordinary people do not know that's true, and they cannot know that's true. But I was leaving at the end thinking, well, perhaps some of you know it's true. And some of you started to go, I do, until I started something else and said another sentence, and then you let your hand down. Well, yeah. Well, there's nothing like a bullet between the eyes to get a real alert man's attention. Momentarily. And then Buddha turns back around and goes, where the hell are my keys?